Okay, let's officially call to order this meeting of the Sustainability Committee on today, June 5th, and we'll begin with a roll call, please.
Chair Megan Harmon here. Councilmember Kristen Sneddon.
Here.
Councilmember Eric Friedman.
Here.
Thank you. And then we'll move, unannounced. In and out. In and out.
Committee members, I just want to introduce our deputy city attorneys, Heather Minter and Ariel Zamora. Heather, I think you might have already know, she's been with us for a little more than a year. Ariel just passed the bar and got sworn in last year.
Congratulations.
She is a former public works employee that went to law school, and we were lucky enough to snag her as our law clerk, and when she passed the bar, we promoted her, so.
Oh,
They
that's
will be working
amazing.
on sustainability and resilience with me, and if I'm not able to be at these meetings, one of them will be in my place.
Awesome. Well, we're very happy to have you both. So thank you for being here. Okay, with that, we will move to item 2, approval of the minutes from April 3rd, 2025. Have a motion or comments? Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor, please say yes.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Okay, and now we will ask for public comment, and I think, Lisa, you want to wait until the item, right? Seeing none, and we aren't online, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll close public comment and move to item 4, discussion of priority legislative bills related to energy and climate action.
So we have Townsend here with us today from Public Affairs, who is our lobbyist, both on the statewide level and federal level. So we do have Joseph online today just because he's the federal representative. And we've asked them to curate some bills that have traction. So there are many, many bills in this legislative cycle that actually could impact the work that we're doing. But these that we're covering today are the ones that are sort of maybe the most impactful or looking to move forward. And so we're going to dive deep. You know, this is a deeper dive than what we had in May in the legislative committee, and really want to hear from you about what types of activities you want us to be undertaking. At the end of the presentation, I'll show you all of the ways we currently engage at both the regulatory and legislative level, and then we can have a discussion. With that, I'll hit it over to Carly and Eric.
Great. Well, good to see you all in person. I think, we love to be here in person. We had a great time presenting at the legislative committee, which is comprised of the same members. But we really want to kind of tailor our engagement and really elevate the city's profile in Sacramento to be one that is sustainability focused, given, how much you guys all invest in, your sustainability resources, kind of how you guys are moving through some of your local initiatives that are well beyond what other local governments do. So we think that that's kind of like the Santa Barbara brand that we can build off of. And so we have a couple of key policy issue areas. If we can go to the next slide. And by no means is this completely comprehensive of everything in the legislature right now, but these are really kind of like a bigger policy buckets, I would say. Electric vehicle transition. Joseph will have some items to add on this, just given, the recension of some of those Clean Air Act waivers and how that's impacting our transition. We have artificial intelligence, CEQA streamlining, which is no surprise, this happens every year, electrical infrastructure during emergencies, and then coastal resilience and energy affordability. So we can get into some of these policies. SB 540 is known as the Pathways Initiative, and this is a pretty revolutionary or big item that we have this legislative session. This would authorize the California Independent Systems Operator, or called ISO, and the Electric Corporation Chief Transmission is operated by CAISO, to move into a regional market with other Western states for the purposes of integrating and creating an independently governed regional electricity market to enhance grid reliability, ultimately reduce costs, and support clean energy goals across this Western interconnection. This is pending action on the Senate floor. There were amendments taken in the Appropriations Committee to add some withdrawal provisions should California want to move out of this and protect it from any legal ramifications. But maybe Lilia has additional kind of background on this and kind of the process from the CalCCA perspective, but there's a massive coalition that includes labor, you know, the states, CalCCA, other, you know, electricity related entities, that have really been moving this forward. Yeah.
Support and an
And
opposition.
in opposition.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
surprised actually.
So,
Yeah, I saw that too.
so a regional grid is something that the state, load serving entities like SBCE have been pursuing for decades.
Mhm.
The reason is we're currently limited where we can buy power and feed it into our grid. And this would expand that to allow us to transact with states that might have surplus of a power type that we'd like, or need a power type that we have excess of, like solar, in the middle of the day. And that's where the cost savings would be. We're getting really constrained in terms of our renewable and carbon-free assets that we can procure, and that's part of the problem. So this would expand the footprint of, I think that, does that have to stay open? Yeah, it has to stay open, yeah. It would expand the footprint that we could procure from, and in theory, drop prices. So that's the foundational purpose of the Pathways Bill. The support really is that glide path, right, to more access to resources. The opposition is because it tends to be because they don't feel like there's adequate guardrails to ensure that that regional operator won't forego our state's climate regulations to buy dirty power, basically. And I think that the opposition has really ramped up recently because of the federal administration. So, I think holistically, people like the concept, right? It's just whether there's enough protections in place. Some of the amendments that were recently made do create a regional, REMA, what does it stand for? I can't remember what it stands for. It's basically a group of 5 overseeing this whole process, and it's the president of the PUC, the president of the California Energy Commission, the heads of both energy committees in the Senate and Assembly, and one more person. Oh, Kelly's the president?
Yeah.
And so they would be the ones to make sure that the procurements and market meet the needs of our state. There's concern because the date for the foundation of that group is wishy-washy currently. And so people are saying we can't do this without that group in place. So there's some unknowns. It's currently getting a lot of heat, is my understanding, up in Sacramento, even though there was a pretty good amount of support for it leading up to this. And so hopefully those shake out. But that would be the concern, is that, you know, that this market sort of overrides some of those pre-existing requirements that we have for power procurement.
Do you think that there would be any possibility that a move in this direction would disincentivize investment by CAISO into grid upgrades, or because they no longer feel that they have to if it's more diffuse?
I don't, that's a great question, Councilmember Herman. I don't think so, because the way that the investor-owned utilities make money is by building generation.
I see that in my
And
bill every,
transmission.
yeah,
And so I think that
that'll still.
unless that changes, which is also on the table,
Yeah,
but I'm not sure will happen in this legislative cycle, I don't see that happening.
and the ROs are still price constrained by the PUC limitations, right? Or,
In theory, yes.
because that would be my other
Yeah.
concern, that it's just like, by going free market, we're gonna. I mean,
Just see it,
yeah,
yeah, skyrocketing price.
okay, sorry,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, I do want to add that it passed the Senate floor last night, so. it's
36-0,
Yeah,
Oh, really?
yeah,
but with major concerns.
yeah. Long
Very
discussion.
concerned, and then I voted.
Yeah.
Yeah. A shock.
What's that?
It's like, oh, that
Yeah.
happened.
It's like the abstain.
So this allows an expansion of where we can procure energy from. We can already get it from out of state though, correct?
We can already get it from.
But where is the new
Western
areas?
market, like Arizona, Nevada, basically anywhere pretty much to the midline of the country. Right now, we're limited on the western seaboard for the most part. We can do a little bit of New Mexico and Arizona, but
Okay, so that So we're expanding there. And then say that this regional organization does decides to go back to like coal, and we don't want to do, California can pull out of it then, right?
That is the idea. That's
Yeah.
yes.
Those are the amendments that were recently taken.
And then
So-
the last question I would have is, and it comes from our experience of this, what about like any legacy contracts? What if they enter into legacy like, is this organization able to procure, say, coal? And then everybody's on there, and then California says, well, we don't want to do coal, so we pull out. Would we still be on the hook for any contracts that are signed while we're still in there?
So they're not buying on our behalf, like, we're still buying the power as a load serving entity. So each load serving entity is making its own decisions, right? And then CAISO organizes it all and distributes it, make sure that it's scheduled appropriately and coming on when we need it. So we in Santa Barbara, we may not benefit from this because we have bucket one requirements, which means we only procure things that feed directly into our state. Or are produced in our state. So this is not really going to help us. But in terms of state energy affordability, it could help. And then that load serving entity would still have to meet its RPS mandate. So coal can only be a portion, if at all. So don't we have a coal mandate in California that you can't buy coal? Yeah, so I don't actually think, I don't know,
So this doesn't actually affect us.
not as directly,
So this is a,
except for contracting, right? It might make our renewable and carbon free contracts less expensive, and that would be
okay,
good.
but so there would be a cost, because this is a bigger issue, and we were talking about, was on, I did a briefing yesterday, is with bills that don't necessarily affect us, it's difficult to gauge whether or not to even take a position
Mhm.
as a city, because there's so many bills up there, and the more you say no to things, you don't want a reputation in Sacramento of saying no, but you also want to be able to find your opinion, so you have to be selective on this. And this is feedback that we've gotten when we're up in Sacramento directly from our the legislators that we met with up there. So depending on where we would go with this, but I guess sometimes saying a yes is helpful too, because then it shows that you're willing to do that. So depending on where we went, if it's a no, I would prefer not to take a position on it, but if it's a yes, then I'd like to understand what the benefits are to a yes.
I would agree with you. I think that in a lot of these cases, we're coalition building, and the fact that our trade organization, CalCCA, has been pushing this bill substantially. You know, if we don't see any poison pills, it might be something we want to consider, just either not taking a position on, which is completely fine, or saying, you know, in concept, we agree, we
Yeah.
support with amends, you know, anything like that is fine.
What are your thoughts on, I mean, 36-0, it's very likely that it will pass, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to make your voice heard, and I think support is obviously one, oppose is obviously another, but there's a lot of gray area in the middle that you can work with. You can say support in concept, you can say support with amendments, you can say support if amended, there's a whole bunch of options. So I guess it matters kind of what we have to say, and then we can back our way into the position from there, I guess.
Are there any amendments that we'd want to have in this, or is it just kind of where it is?
I think, you know, this is the product of maybe like 5+ years of negotiations and coalition development. So I don't know if Santa Barbara specifically needs to engage on its own. This is something that we may work within the CalCCA organization kind of framework to push forward. Given that I think it kind of aligns with those goals, so.
And some of what we're discussing today, just to be clear, it doesn't matter if we take a position or not, we just want you to be aware of sort of the landscape we're treading in, right? So.
Yeah, we don't have a recommended position on this, so.
Is there a potential here that if we were having a more stable alternative energy source from a broader area, that then we could make the case for that we don't need to rely on nuclear locally? Is there a possibility down the line that then like?
That is possible, Councilmember Sutton. Right now, one of our biggest DOI challenges is getting it built, right? Getting anything built. And so this does broaden that, catalog of options that we can pull from. I know you and I have talked at length about Diablo and other nuclear resources, and so that I think is a very protracted conversation that
It's
it
just-
doesn't
it's-
solve.
It's not an
perfect.
argument, I'm just sort of.
Yeah, yes,
Maybe a benefit.
could be.
Yeah, okay. I think support in concept, with amendments, if we even wanted to take a position, but I don't think that this is the one to. Really press for.
Yeah,
Agreed.
Great. We'll move to the next slide. We have been, poring over bills that have to do with coastal resiliency, coastal land use. And a lot of the bills that we've seen this year got significantly watered down. For example, that one bill from Alvarez that would have, eliminated the LCP process for the development of student housing, the CDP process. That was significantly amended to create a new just shot clock for the coastal commission to approve certain projects. So we didn't leave that as one that we really needed to engage in, but then it's significantly watered down. This is another bill that kind of is a little watered down too. AB 996 establishes a voluntary early consultation process between local governments and the Coastal Commission to support the preparation and review of local coastal programs. This is really to support the implementation of SB 272, which requires everyone to get their LCPs online after a certain date. So while this is a permissive voluntary bill, we do think that it facilitates greater coordination between local governments and the Coastal Commission. So, this is something that Cal Cities is supporting. We just want to flag it as a positive bill, kind of in that vein. So any questions on this?
I would just say that this would actually be very positive for us because we are so far ahead
Right.
that we didn't actually approve our field revised plans according to SB
Mhm.
272. And so SB 272 kind of made it, so if you were ahead, like, are you gonna go all the way back and do the approval process? So this actually would clarify that you don't, that
Okay.
you're moving forward, and so for us, it would just make things simple.
yeah, this is a good bill, so for that reason in particular.
I thought there was a funding component of this.
There initially was,
Okay.
but it got stripped out in order to get it out of the appropriations committee.
So
yeah.
it's still on us.
But it is voluntary though, so it's not a mandate.
Yes.
According to the analysis, they think it's about $1 million ongoing for the commission for 5 positions.
Yeah.
Could it possibly be like we do a letter of support and it showcases that, we've done our LCP and we support that other cities, this process and it's gone well, when we did early consultation and working in collaboration. It could be like, we could be like the
Yeah.
model of,
Yeah.
It's like a brag letter, right? Like,
Yeah,
exactly.
I love that.
This is a great idea. It
Yeah,
worked for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to showcase that we are really embodying those best practices too.
And we support others.
Yeah.
But we did just approve a seawall and a sea level rise update, everybody, so
Oh,
I know, crazy.
where was it? Where is
Pacifica.
Seagrass?
Beth Meyer from
Pacifica.
Yeah. In Pacifica.
It's a unique case though,
It is, but we were all like, we never thought this way. Here we are.
We'll move on to the next bill. AB 306, this is one that we talked about in lunch committee. We already have an opposing less amended position. So just wanted to kind of add this into the kind of overarching housing and streamlining policy issue area. So as you all know, AB 306 establishes a moratorium on new residential building standards. It does have an urgency clause and would retroactively freeze all local building standard progression after June 30th of this month. So there's some weird, timing there in terms of when we can adopt 2025 standards, because typically that process happens at the end of the year. So we are working diligently with a coalition and with the author's office and with other members to really advocate for us to be able to adopt the 2025 standards. and get everything set into place before this moratorium could theoretically go into effect. And then really only apply it to new development. So, there's been some traction there. This bill is moving quickly through the legislative process, given that it is kind of co-authored by the Assembly Speaker. But there is a lot of mounting opposition, so we are taking away at this. And it is pending, approval or, where it will be assigned in the second House Policy Committee.
And I did want to just mention, because at Ledge Committee, you, Councilmember Smith, you said, why don't we just flat out oppose it? This one is again, back to that nuance of what position you want to take. It is going so full steam ahead with this, the speaker being the author, that we were trying to be strategic. Like, this one was clearly going to get adopted, and so we thought our power really rested in trying to be collaborative. And hence the oppose unless amended, and we suggested amendments with a coalition, several coalitions statewide. Those amendments have verbally been supported by the speaker. We have yet to see them. He did provide some amendments to the bill that were disappointing, unrelated to the ones that we proposed. So we're still waiting to see if those happen, but he has stated he does intend for the 2025 code to be adoptable. Again, as Carly said, the timing seems to be off, and we don't understand how we are supposed to do that, but hopefully that all gets clarified before the bill is finalized. Otherwise, we do oppose it.
Would say it does go the way we hope, that we could adopt the 2025. Do we have our code coming this year for any updates, or did we already adopt it?
So we do it every year, the triennial code cycle, or not every year, every 3 years,
Every 3
we
years.
adopt the triennial code cycle.
And then it's scheduled to be this year.
It is scheduled, so it's 2025 gets adopted January of 2026.
Usually
always-
November.
Okay.
Of this year.
So it
And
is
it goes
something that
into
we would,
effect.
it is something that would come up, and it's on track to come up. And
That is very unclear in the bill language. It does not read as though we're going to be able to adopt the 2025 cycle, because it's, the moratorium starts this month.
yeah,
But in conversations with the speaker, he does intend for that to go through, so we
Yeah.
really.
that would the amendment, if the amendments were to go through, then we would be able to adopt it. And on our
Yes.
end, it is scheduled to come up. I was worried that sometimes things get delayed here and it wouldn't be adopted until.
When it would come up either way, because it's just doesn't.
It's a requirement from the state to do that every.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If we don't adopt it, then we're stuck with the code as the residential code as is, so we adopted it, and that way, that's when you see all the, how we amend the code.
So we have to do the bare minimum, and then other things we can put more that we want it for locally. Okay,
Yeah.
I got it. All right, so.
So AB 609, this has to do with one of the many SEQA streamlining bills that are moving this year. This creates a SEQA exemption for certain qualifying housing development projects, specifically infill development projects. It includes streamlining approvals for developers if specific site zoning, environmental, and health safety criteria are met. So housing developments up to 20 acres in urban infill areas that comply with local zoning density and safety criteria may be exempt from CEQA review. Developers must complete certain environmental assessments. And then there are some, exemptions for projects near like freeways and other things like that. So have been questions posed about whether, this CEQA streamline, like what supersedes what in terms of the state code associated with things like density bonus law, with builders remedy projects. So we're seeking clarity from the author's office and from Ledge Council, just to ensure that this CEQA mitigation does not apply to things like builders remedy projects and other things. So more to come on that, but we don't have a recommended position on this. Local agencies, for the most part, have not really been engaging in this bill too much. We do understand that the governor is looking at putting together a comprehensive CEQA streamlining trailer bill package together. So this vehicle may not be moving forward as is. So more to come on that as the budget situation starts to get figured out, but it's kind of a mess right now with the federal government. So happy to answer any questions on this, and I realize that this bill's a little more technical.
This one to me is like the really big red flag, and if we were gonna pick one, in my view, to go hard against, it would be this one, because it's not about YIMBY or NIMBY, it's about environmental quality, and it's not just, I mean, it's, you know, not just about toxins or other things, but in our particular area with the mountains, with the slopes, with the creeks, the 20-acre parcel is huge. That's a huge area. And it's, you know, it's not really infill at that point. That's,
Right.
you know, city blocks redone.
Mhm.
And I think too, like just the CEQA, I just had some previous notes here too about you know, police, fire, parks, schools, other impacts to an area, and in a constrained area our size with the mountains and the ocean, by fire. I mean, there's so many issues there that skipping over would be a real disservice to the safety, health and safety of our public. And this one, of all of them, this one to me is like the most troubling of the impact it could have in our constrained locations with so many hazards.
Councilmember Shen, if I may, we met with the team and with the community development department yesterday.
Mhm.
And we were talking about this and how if it really does have an impact on Santa Barbara, and if we would see it, because there are the carve out provisions that I think a lot of we might fall into. I think like Carly was saying, it's just kind of a mess right now. The bill is just completely unclear, and so we really want some more clarity. I think before, I can't tell you not to oppose or not, but
Mhm.
it's just right now, like looking at it, it's like, do we oppose it or do
There's
we
too many
not? Like,
questions, yeah.
yeah, there's just so many questions, and so we were talking about maybe we just like, we need the bill author to explain what they mean and like clarify this bill. Like, it's.
Well, that's what's most troubling about it, is that you could have stacking and you know, it's like, okay, it doesn't apply to builder's remedy, but maybe it
That's, yeah, that
does
maybe it
if
does.
it's
No,
already
that's why
this,
it's-
and,
Yeah,
you know, it's the potential here is staggering.
it is, and I think that's why so could be an opposed unless amended, or like, let's not take a position until we have more information, but, you know, obviously that's completely up to the committee.
There are environmental findings right now as it's listed, like for instance, this can't be located in a high fire area, it can't be located in a floodway. It can't be located in an area affected by 5 feet of sea level rise. So there are, and it can't be in like a sensitive habitat. There are.
But what about
Right.
like schools and traffic
Yeah,
patterns
so
and
I think-
stormwater and other?
Yeah, so there are some protections in there as it's currently written, but it is very unclear.
Yeah.
I think generally with bills like this one, you know, the state's struggling to strike a balance between affordability, which is, you know, a crisis as we are all well aware, and the notion that the opportunity to rebuild in an urban space is the opportunity to rebuild better, right? And so that's what, to me, this really opens a challenge of not allowing us to rebuild better because we're just trying to rebuild as quickly as possible. So that's where, you know, I think we're continuing to track and look for some protections of those, you know.
Well, is there an affordability component to it? I mean, is it even saying that you can skip CEQA, but you're gonna get 100% affordable? So it's like, why, that
It's just
doesn't
the-
even,
the
that's not, if you're
quickness.
gonna get, well, the quickness is gonna make market rate, and that causes even more environmental impacts. So I'm just like so opposed to this one, and it's murky. That's I mean,
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
the unclarity.
I agree. I also don't support this, but I want to be very clear. I am hugely supportive of CEQA reform. And I think that's part of where the challenge is from our lobbying perspective, is that CEQA reform is just like so past time to happen. There are much easier and more surgical ways to do it that protect exactly what you're talking about. So I think, you know, if I'm hearing from the experts who are having these conversations that we should wait, I'm okay waiting. I don't support it, so I don't think it's gonna change. But my one sort of feedback for you all is that what I'm hearing, and this is what I'm hearing from you and what I'm hearing from folks in Sacramento similarly, is that there's more to come on this issue, but if you hear that this is picking up steam, then I would really, really like, let's hold an emergency meeting and move forward.
Yeah.
I'm okay waiting, but what I don't want to do is wait and then you're like, oh,
That's it.
it's gonna get passed in 4 days. Like, if you're
Yeah.
hearing that
Yeah.
it's starting to move and that this is the vehicle, that it has any chance of going anywhere, then I really want to make sure that we're involved in that
Mhm.
conversation. If it's useless and we're like sort of cutting off our nose to spite our face, because there's gonna be a real fight about sequel reform that we should be having, and it's adjacent to this, and this is not it. Okay, you know, I'm fine, but that would be my only caveat, because this is just, it's crazy. I mean, let's just like limit the judicial review period to 3 months. That would be a huge win,
Right.
for exactly the interests of this bill. you
This
know?
is a very, as you kind of mentioned, politically charged concept right
Yeah.
outside of Sacramento. It is very much after the LA fires and how to
Mm-hmm.
rebuild that area very quickly, maybe not better, like Ellie just said, but quickly, right? And that was kind of a key piece of this. I don't know if it is the vehicle, to your point, at the end, it could be a budget trailer bill, it could be this, it could be anything. The governor has definitely been vocal about it, and obviously so is the assembly member, but I think information gathering has to be like key here. It has to be the number one thing we do. The next thing we do is information gather in terms of making sure we understand exactly what it does, because we
what to
don't
oppose.
want to come in heavy on the other side and be wrong about like what we assumed, right? And we're gonna, that doesn't make us look good. So making sure we have exactly
Sure.
what it is, that, and then we can make the decision of whether or not we like that, hate that, change it, what, you know, kind of go from there. But I don't want to be wrong about what the bill does. in terms
We
of-
can't assume certain things that are critical for us in terms of opposition or not making a decision. So I think, really good points about it carves out a lot of exemptions that this bill then would have less applicability to us. And then there's just a blanket statement about adherence to local ordinances,
That's the big one,
which
yeah.
we know go away with state bonus density and builders remedy projects, but they're not explicitly saying that. So that is really our next action, and we don't need to reconvene to take a position. I think it's
You know
according
that,
to our
yeah.
ledge platform. We just, and I think that us seeking that clarity are gonna help a lot of other municipalities and Cal cities,
Yeah.
everyone will come out of the woodwork on this
Mm-hmm.
if that clarification goes,
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was gonna.
Either
think,
way,
Is that,
yeah.
don't think that every other city is doing what you're doing right now and actually diving into the
Yeah.
details. of
They're
it.
making assumptions that they.
They're making assumptions
Yeah.
probably, or relying on someone else to do it first. And so I think even having that conversation with the auditor's office is going to be positive, because
and
we're gonna
much-
tell
Yes,
them,
clarity.
we need you to clarify. I don't even care if it's like against us, it's just
So
whatever.
we know what.
Yeah, we just need you to
Yeah.
clarify, and it makes the bill better, frankly.
Yeah.
Just by clarifying it makes it better,
Mm-hmm.
so we should be positive.
Thank you. So we have a public comment on this bill specifically. Can we take that right now? Is that
Yeah,
okay?
I want to respond quickly to these exceptions that you mentioned, hazardous waste and fire zone. If you read the natural resources legislative analysis, it specifically states that the language is murky. We have the exact same language on fire for SB 9 that we had to then go back and do our own carve out in a blanket way. So don't assume because it says that it's exempted it in the law, that that law is seal tight. So go back and look at the natural resources, bill, sorry,
Okay.
and I'm certainly
for
for
that.
that now, sorry. Just had to say that, because we can't assume, and if you go to the bill's author, she's gonna tell you it's sealed tight, and it's not. Okay, so as you noted, this is a huge exemption for a very large project. The Assembly Legislative Analysis says 15 football fields, 8 to 10 blocks, and they even said 6 Costco's. I think they were trying to get your attention. The bill is troubling for 3 main reasons. First, it won't make housing more affordable. It doesn't add an affordability requirement. There are already 15 existing laws that provide CEQA streamlining for 100% affordable and mixed income housing. In contrast, the bill is designed, as many of the opponents point out, to fast track market rate projects, even those with no affordable units, by allowing them to bypass and not pay for any adverse significant impacts. Second, the bill is legally contradictory and overly broad, as has been raised. It says on the one hand, only projects that are locally conforming to zoning and ordinances can get this kind of exemption, but on the other hand, it also promotes what we call state law stacking. SB 35, builder's remedy, state bonus density, actually state bonus density is specifically stated as something that could apply. And as you know, state bonus density allows waivers and concessions and incentives. So you can't have it both ways, Assemblywoman Wicks. That ambiguity must be clarified. Third, the environmental, an important point here is that legal and legislative experts that I've talked to are concerned that the bill could apply to builder's remedy projects or even be retroactively applied to projects that haven't yet begun CEQA review. We have a couple of projects here, haven't begun CEQA review, and they're fast tracking it with a vehicle that is a legislative trailer bill with the governor, and they believe there's suspicion that they're doing this purposely to empower developers who have currently pending builder's remedy projects. Big alert. And by limiting CEQA review, the bill removes our ability to access and mitigate a broad range of impacts, loss of habitat, wildfire, traffic storm runoff, air and water quality degradation, overburdening our infrastructure, emergency access. I'd recommend oppose. I really, when you're ready, and I like the strategy unfolding here, get more information. Don't come out of the gate like, we hate this, get clarification, but definitely, here are some amendments. Reduce the acreage. Clarify the bill does not apply to builder's remedy, or clarify how the state stacking works. Close the fire zone loophole tightly. We've gone through this too many times with the state. And finally, the real path to both sustainability and affordability ultimately depends on a permanent dedicated source of funding.
Yeah.
That's enough, right? Unfortunately, our current budget, and I have to say this, falls far short of what's needed to meet these critical goals for our community. So that's it.
Thank you. Eric?
Thanks. Yeah, I wanted to hear what Lisa had to say, and it's pretty much what I thought you were gonna say. So I'm opposed to this, and I don't think it's good. And the thing is, it won't stop here, obviously. I mean, every time they say, oh, this, then that becomes the new baseline for the next one, and eventually it's like, why even have local government at some point? But I agree with the strategy to strategically oppose it at the right time. Because there could be some clarifications or there are going to be clarifications that are needed. And again, it gets back to what I was saying earlier, and is when you oppose it, you want to oppose it from a position of strength. And you said, Eric, and you don't want to do it and then find out you're wrong. That's like the worst thing, because then you get a bad reputation, and then in the future, you're just not listened to. So timing is everything. And at some point, I'm pretty confident we will be opposing it. And it's good to know that within our ledge platform, if there is something where it comes up pretty quickly, we don't have to do a specific meeting. We can just have it signed and sent in, because it's within our ledge platform. So that gives me the confidence that if something weird were to happen and it just got fast tracked, we could be on the record as opposing it. Kind of along where my colleagues and Lisa were, we need clarification, but what is the definition of urban infill? I can think of one of the projects, I don't want to specifically name it, but it is a builder's remedy project. And it is the areas around things like you could have public parks, you could have a road around it, is a road around it, is a nonprofit, like a museum around something, does that count as public infrastructure? So those types of things, what is the definition of urban infill? And then getting back to that one key, local ordinances do apply, but yet we all know state bonus density supersedes local ordinances. Which one is it? So it's unclear. So those types of things for us, and to the point that you both made earlier, just we need a clarification so we know either way, whether it's, even if it's terrible for us, at least we know. And then we can say we are opposing it because of this, and it's a much more concise and more specific opposition if we have answered those questions, than that you don't want to oppose something that's ambiguous at best right now. But ultimately, I think it's a bad bill.
Yeah.
So that's what I got.
And then I also support waiting, and but some of the things, if we wanted to put in the positive things, I heard you say, like, we support CEQA reform, and other things that were concerns, like, personally, I would support streamlining if it's 100% affordable. You know, streamlining if it's for a rebuild after a natural disaster. Streamline if local government can override and say, actually, it's necessary for this sensitive site with findings, you know, because it's near sensitive creeks or tribal resources or historically sensitive areas, or it's on an earthquake fault, or it's near one of our waterways, or affects our stormwater, you know, some sort of findings for why local government could say this one is not in that streamline. And then clearly the acreage, I mean, the 8 to 10 blocks is not infill, you know, so, you know, we would support reform if it had these certain things, or, you know, like you're saying, guardrails too. Again, clarity about whether it applies, you know, retroactively to builder's remedy or state bonus density, or, you know, the compounding effects of different, you know, streamlining, if it reaches a certain point where those compounded effects create a CEQA issue, that we would have the authority to be able to say at this particular site, it's necessary because, or historical, you know, buried tanks or things that we know about the area locally because it's our local area. So I think we could, you know, maybe down the line, maybe have some type of positive thing toward it, but these things being clarified and that really local agencies know what the environmental true risks are, and to please allow that type of, with findings, override.
What's the direction of the committee if we do find out that it was an unintentional error in that, let's say, builders remedy projects did not apply to this? What would then be the direction? If that was like a narrow, like, oh yeah, that's our bad, we meant to exclude builders remedy from this.
I think we still need clarity on the local
Yeah.
ordinances versus state
Mhm.
bonus density.
Yeah.
And 8 to 10 blocks is
Yeah, the
like,
size, all the fire, all that stuff. We need,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, what would that do with our stormwater? Like if you had 8 to 10 blocks of State Street, say, that was CEQA exempt, like that would completely mess with our, how
Well,
we do our
wouldn't
water.
stormwater ordinances still apply? CEQA exemption doesn't change the stormwater requirements for a development. It's just,
I am curious
I don't know.
how 306
so.
would impact
Then
this.
it's just,
on the
you don't have to do
building
an
code.
EIR.
review.
Yeah, you just don't have to do an EIR, that's
Right.
basically.
They would be able to kind of in conflict.
Like 306 would potentially inform 609 if we pass, if in response, we were to try and pass local ordinances that have, you know, adopt a bespoke building code to help protect some of these, we wouldn't be able to if 306 passes. So there's some like interaction here.
Right.
Yeah.
There's so many unknowns. I mean, I guess if it was a totally different bill, I could support it.
Mhm. Yeah.
I mean, you know, I don't know. Yeah, sure, there's a world where I say yes,
Yeah.
definitely, but I don't know that we're close to that, you know?
This bill reminds me in your, what
I
you just
know,
said,
so bad.
the knowns, the unknowns, and the known unknowns.
Oh, yeah.
That's what this
Yes.
bill is.
Okay, so we have some good direction on that. What we'll do is we'll follow up with the auditor's office, with Ledge Council, with some of our policy committee experts that have been there for years and understand the code inner workings. And we'll get some clarity and move on from there.
I have a question. Can we discuss bills that weren't agendized?
In the discussion at the end.
Yeah,
This was just an overview.
there was no.
Yeah.
Okay, because I think one bill that's related to this is SB 79, which Open Valley Times.
I was
today
just
said
gonna
it has-
ask about that.
Has the Senate, and so I think the council members
Yeah.
might be interested in update on that one as well.
Yes.
Yeah, we're happy to do it now, or
Yeah, I mean, that's related to this bill. I mean, given that we're on the housing kind of portion of this. We did a deep dive with, planning and community development staff yesterday through the specifics of the bill. And there really is not a lot of application on SB 79 to the city specifically because we don't have high quality transit that qualifies for the streamlining trigger.
What?
It's 24 stops in one.
24 stops in one day. Yeah,
20 or 15-minute bus intervals.
yeah. we just
But
don't
we
do
have
that.
that. I mean, it's applied to other things that didn't have to have, like on De La Guerra, we had that one that because it was within the 1 mile of the high quality transit of the metro, then it didn't have to have parking or something. We've
So they
definitely
define, they
applied
keep
this.
all the bills define transportation and transit differently, and so, you know. So this one, the way it's defined, we don't think that we fall into it. However, we were talking about, this is one that it, you know, we would want some, definitely to see it amended, because the way it's written is, Carly, Eric, help me, it's,
Yeah.
it is anytime you trigger that, so we were talking about if we had, for us, it's the Amtrak. The
Right.
train line, so say for Fiesta or, you know, the Olympics
The
are brought
Olympics.
up, like, that's, we may like get that, like the 12 trains that day, because, and then, so we were thinking, you know, amending it, so it's not a trigger within
One time.
Yeah, cause
Yeah.
it's a 3-year window, right? So
Yeah.
you don't wanna be penalized
For
for,
rail service. with
one
a
day.
total of, At least 24 trains per weekday across both directions, not meeting the standard of the other one at any point in the last 3 years. So that you
Take out
could,
that last
you could
one.
look at
Yeah.
that and be like, well, one day you had
At any
24
point,
trains, so
yeah.
now the entire, so they changed
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna look for a clarification / amendment on that to be like,
And
that's
it was the 15-minute stops too. That's the one that came up.
Bus
like
ser-
Milpas and whatever.
bus
'cause-
service is a service interval of 15 minutes or less during the morning and afternoon peak commute periods.
Yeah,
Which we don't have.
so it kind of brought up the fact that it encourages cities not to have good transit.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, because I remember saying on the De La Guerra one, well, then we should change our bus schedule.
Yeah,
So even if they enhance our commuter route in Ventura, we saw a lot of wiggle room, that's like we're at 8 stops.
do we have any stops that are 15? There's gotta be some that are more than
No.
15.
No, we're talking about the train.
Is this bill only applicable to the train or
No,
is
and
it
bus.
It was
in
bus.
buses? But there's gotta be areas in town
15
that are.
minutes is pretty
15.
quick.
And we
That's,
have a 15-minute interval.
We don't, not even the UCSB like
Not
express.
Could reach this number.
Oh, cause it's twice a day, the morning and the afternoon, right?
What about
Just
morning and afternoon peak commute periods, yeah.
So we don't, I would thought we'd have at least one that goes every 15
Clearly, you're not
minutes.
riding the bus enough.
I haven't been on the bus.
We don't.
There is some light rail transit, like streetcar, trolley, tramway stuff as well. But that, you know, we have to get, I need.
What are golf
need to know more.
carts?
Right.
I was gonna say with the State Street.
Yeah.
League,
And the State Street golf carts.
Yes, yeah.
It's not a commuter.
Yeah.
Well, we have the trolleys. that
We have a
can-
lot of members, like during the floor conversation, get up and say, this does not apply to my district whatsoever, like I just don't have transit. It really is targeting some of those areas on the peninsula within the Bay Area that are not developing to the tune of what Scott Wiener wants. So it's a little bit targeted to the Bay Area, not
The
necessarily.
easy fix would just say, make it applicable to the Bay.
Right.
Area.
County specific, yeah.
Well, like you just said county specific, and that raises a question, like they might first say cities, but then they might say county specific, and like, do we have that kind of plan in the county wide somewhere? And then would it apply kind of thing?
It's all outwardly based off the transit stops.
Okay, well. Thank you for flagging. I was gonna bring that one up. I'm not a fan of anything that like. Does it around transit that already exists instead of having you plan where you might want transit to be instead, or you might want, you know, like. Depending on if an area like La Cumbre or, so, you know, some other area is gonna have some big development, you might want to locally be able to. Flex where the transit is and not have what's pre-existing transit driving
Mhm.
where you put things.
There is, if you could look into this more, but you just gave me a thought, with La Cumbre. And having, we're gonna have something like 1,400 new units up there if you count the housing authority projects and the La Cumbre, both of them and all that's coming up there that are gonna be online. Within the next like probably 10 years. That might actually get us in that area a requirement to get within the 15-minute to alleviate traffic. So it might not affect us now, but it would be good to know from our
That's what I'm
staff, our community
saying.
development
Yeah.
staff, that is this something that we could potentially cross that 15-minute threshold within the next few years? So.
Yeah.
So that might change how the urgency for us to look at it, or it might be, hey, we're kind of hands off because it doesn't affect us, but it might
Mhm.
Yeah, there's plenty of reasons to oppose it other
Yeah.
than, other than it not applying to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of.
Okay,
different
perfect. I just wanna make
reasons.
sure,
Yeah,
'cause,
We have covered a lot of different ways to oppose
Yeah.
this if we need to.
Okay, that's the other question I was gonna ask is, is it worth it to us at some point to oppose it? But I think you said there's more, it's kind of working its way in different angles right now, so it's a little premature as well.
Well, it wouldn't be premature. I mean, it barely passed the floor with one vote, after it initially did not pass, they had to close the
Yeah.
roll and whip some votes real quick.
Yeah.
It's gonna have a hard time in the assembly. But it is, I mean, there's about 75 cities that are probably opposed to it already, maybe
Maybe
100.
we should,
Mhm.
what's that?
Sorry.
Oh, we can't, huh?
No, we can
Can we?
oppose it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course we can.
can we?
And we can be strategic in our letter with like how to oppose it.
Yeah, and I'll have a conversation with the author staff about that particular amendment. I mean, I don't know if we wanna go with public unless amended for that.
What are the other cities doing?
Amended to what?
Amended to,
They're opposed.
clarify that
I think
the,
it's easier just to.
the transit stops is based off of an average.
Rather than.
I
Rather
don't even
than
want
a
that though, because with like what Cumbra say, and if that one triggers it, then all of a sudden floodgates open along that whole transit.
Yeah.
route. It's not, so we might have been able to handle with our water infrastructure, or transit, or our schools, or all these things, this one large development.
Mhm.
But if by having one, that means, oh, now this is whole corridor, you can handle them all, just because your transit can handle them, doesn't mean everything else can handle it.
Can you speak to de-incentivizing us to make improvements in our transit, like across the state, that it's actually doing the opposite?
I don't know how well that argument holds water with them. I think they would say that that's, you should be prioritizing both, like you should be incentivized to do transit because it's the right thing to do,
Well, no, just force us to do transit.
That's what they would say, yeah. But I do think the clarification, regardless of what we do on the bill, the clarification in the last 3 years, at any point in the last 3 years is important because I can't imagine they did that on purpose, not thinking about the Olympics or anything else that's going to very temporarily increase these transit lines. I can't.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, but I really don't think that they intended that to be punitive on like a special event basis, right?
Well, they might though, because not punitive, but they might be like, well, if you have that capacity and you can do that, even for a special event, then why aren't you doing that?
Very much could be on
Good
purpose.
point.
So all the more reason, I'm gonna make a motion to oppose
All more
79.
reason.
I think we should oppose it.
Should we do that all together at the end?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Alright,
just so you guys know, my daughter has a half day, so I have to leave at 50.
well, we're
Take her in.
almost done.
Well, great, we'll jam through the next couple of slides. This one has to do with, emergency operations and electrical infrastructure. There were a number of bills that also sought to kind of improve, coordination with utilities, as it pertains to public safety power shutoffs, but they died. So this bill expands and reforms wildfire mitigation responsibilities for our electric utilities, with a particular focus on post 2024 events like the Eaton fire.
Mhm.
It enhances coordination protocols, it strengthens planning requirements, and it imposes new limitations on how utilities may finance fire mitigation investments. So utilities under this scope have to consider areas adjacent to high fire threat zones, not just the zones themselves.
Mhm.
And then they have to document any past communication failures with local governments during emergencies and proposed improvements. So that enhanced coordination. Utilities must also evaluate whether undergrounding power lines in fire impacted areas is more cost effective than above ground hardening.
Mhm.
So there's an incentive there. And now they have to allow non-account holders such as renters to sign up for public safety power shutoff notification. So it expands that to those that don't own their properties. It requires utilities to collaborate with public safety partners to improve messaging during outages. And then it has to require utilities to identify any lapses in coordination from prior events. As for the financial reform piece, it prohibits large IOUs from adding certain wildfire mitigation capital expenses to their equity rate base beyond their current $5 billion cap. So protecting ratepayers. So we view this as a positive bill. It's moving
support.
through. The second House Policy Committee had already passed the Senate floor. And it really is kind of the only vehicle that has qualified to move. I mean, there's been a number of other bills that sought to do similar things, but they did not make it out of appropriations. So we don't technically have a recommendation on this bill, but this is something that does align with our platform and could be a support position.
I would say strong support on this one. And
Yeah.
then that gives us a track record too. Yes, but also, yes, where it comes to safety, high fire, these kinds of things. Yeah, agree.
Agree.
These two bills have to do with the onset of AI. And what that means for our energy usage and water usage. I mean, these, when you're chat GPTing something,
It's a bottle of water for every 100-word email you chat.
yeah,
Yeah.
they need a lot of water to cool off those generators and you
Yep.
need a lot of energy to, produce those
Careful.
brilliant AI answers.
I
that
think
people are
Google
seeing
built
for.
25 new. Oh, I agree with that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I walked in on the wrong.
So these kind of go hand in hand. AB 222 requires the publication of energy use related to the development and use of artificial intelligence. Requires the Energy Commission to track energy usage of data centers in the state and tasks the CPC to minimize utility costs related to data center development. AB 93 has to do with the water portion of this. It requires anyone who owns or operates a data center to provide under penalty of perjury an estimate of their water use prior to applying to a city or county with an initial business license or permit. So it really puts the onus on the data center developer to tell our local utilities what they plan to use and really be held to that standard so that we're all kind of protected from that.
Yeah, this is a good example too of how bills can change for the better, believe it or not, throughout the process, but the first iteration of this bill actually required the utilities to report to the state of how much water is being used in their area on data centers. And the utilities were like, that's a really hard thing for us to, to guess at, right? And we don't want to be wrong. So then they flipped it to like, okay, then the data centers have to provide it to the utility, and then you have to provide it to the state. But you also have to do a cost of service analysis. There is a requirement in there that the city has to do a cost of service analysis to those data centers, part of the Prop 218 kind of method. So it shouldn't be that difficult, but it is a better bill in that, puts the onus on someone else and not you. But I think as Carly was saying, that AI, like, you talk about the AI conversation of the ethics and the morality, and then the next conversation should be energy water on AI, because it is so intensive, and then how are you able to do it? And frankly, the technology is gonna far outpace our ability to keep up on the energy and water side. If AI gets deployed as we think it might get deployed, I mean, we don't have enough water and energy for it right now, if it all happens at the same time. So this bill is kind of one of those bills to try to plan for it and try to have at least data to make decisions.
And just to add on to that, I think it exposes sort of the hidden costs of AI,
Yes.
right? We're all using it in our
Yep.
day-to-day. You do a Google search, no, you're not using AI. And so the really immediate impacts of AI development are that it does put constraints on our renewable portfolio contracts, because they're also required to meet California Renewable Portfolio Standard. And so again, constrains that market for renewable access. And so quite immediately, we can see cost impacts related to, what our ratepayers have to pay to get their energy. So we're definitely in support of this first step.
Mhm.
I'm supportive of this.
I have strong support of both. I mean, like Google just made 25 new micro nuclear plants. to
3
be-
Mile Island's being reactivated.
Exactly. So if that was gonna happen locally to support, data centers,
You
I
see-
think we would want to know that.
Microsoft's reactivated. 3 Mile Island.
Drain Pachuma Drive.
Yeah.
I think this is a good example too of these bills, especially the water one. These are good examples of where Other cities are not weighing in necessarily, but
Mhm.
by us weighing in, we are putting ourselves on the map as like that.
Fits
kind
our
of change.
brand.
It fits
Yeah.
the brand that,
Yeah.
that we're establishing, right? It's very much on brand for what we're talking about. So I think that's a strong, a good path forward exactly. on this.
I do just want to note that the Santa Barbara Chamber has opposed it formally. There
That's
is.
fine.
fine.
Just putting it out there. A lot of
Um,
chambers, I
because
think
they're-
just in terms
Well,
of.
The new regulation.
Yeah.
But Aurelia, the Santa Barbara Chamber
That's
Keeper
what
has.
that's what
supported
they
it.
want.
Exactly, thank you.
The tech, the UCSB, or all the use, I know, but they want the tech.
Yeah,
So
it's
that-
the reach,
that's
it's
the
recorded.
recording, that's the
Every-
recording, yeah.
So just making sure that everybody's.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Let's fly up right now.
That's an example of how they do not look at us individually, but they think they're looking at us regionally.
Right.
You know, Toledo puts one in, it affects our water.
Don't take our water, Galita.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide and I will have Joseph chime in on this too. EV transition. We have advanced clean fleets regulations, which, you know, affect our procurement targets for completely zero emissions vehicles. That also plays into how many chargers do you guys have to have online, especially to charge your public fleets that are not necessarily publicly accessible. But there are some evolving federal dynamics from the new administration that are impacting, you know, the availability of these new vehicles, but also, you know, how we can start procuring and meeting those targets, given that the regulations still apply to the public fleets, but not necessarily the private market. So I'll turn it over to Joseph just to add some more color to this, and maybe you could add some more into both the Clean Air Act waiver rescission, but also some of these tax credits that we're seeing this year.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Carly, and good to be with everyone. So to add a little bit of background to this, as you all know, California has long led kind of the charge regulating motor vehicle emissions. I'm seeing people react, so I'm not sure if they can hear me.
We can't, it's very loud.
Down.
So low.
There you go.
Am I good now? Okay. So thank you, Carly. I'll give a little bit of additional background to how we got to where we are. Title II of the Clean Air Act gives exclusive authority to the federal government to regulate emissions for new vehicles and preempts states from adopting or enforcing competing regulations. But California is the lone exception in this. And they base this on a compelling need, air pollution, and several other factors. So EPA has a long history of granting waivers for California and has allowed other states to adopt these standards. 17 states, I believe, have done so so far. And to date, California has received about 100 waivers and authorizations through this process. But where we are now, the Trump administration is very much opposed to this. But there's no mechanism within the Clean Air Act to process to revoke a waiver. So they're trying a couple different methods here. The current EPA is likely to pursue lengthy court battles, but a faster way to get around this, some argue, is through the Congressional Review Act, or CRA. So you may see that language popping up when you look into this issue. However, the Government Accountability Office and the Senate Parliamentarian have both said that waivers are not subject within the CRA because they're not technically rules, but rather legal orders. So what does all this mean? Despite the Senate parliamentarians ruling, they are not, they do not have binding decisions, and overruling the parliamentarian is pretty rare, but it did happen recently. On May 22nd, the Senate passed 3 resolutions nullifying California's ability to set emission standards for passenger cars, light duty vehicles, trucks that are stricter than EPA standards. So like with a lot of developments with the Trump administration, much of this is going to end up in the courts, and we're going to, be in another waiting game. But California is also exploring other ways to regulate emissions and get around this. So we'll see how that develops a little bit further. And then on the EV transition piece, I'm sure folks are familiarizing themselves with the budget reconciliation process and HR1, or the One Big Beautiful Bill, as it has been called. This bill does obviously a lot of things, but for the purposes of this committee, there are measures within there that would open public lands for drilling, expedite permitting, and most importantly, to a lot of folks interested in this, eliminate or phase out the clean energy tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act. These overhauls are estimated to save around $500 billion, but ultimately will slow the shift to renewables. So there's a number of different tax credits that were included in the IRA, new, used, and commercial EV credits, clean electricity production credits, home upgrade credits, advanced manufacturing credits. And all of these are changed in one way or another, but the bottom line here is most of them are going to be either eliminated or phased out much earlier than they were originally intended to. So there's a big lobbying effort in Congress right now from industry, from cities, from different parties all around the nation to try to at least walk some of this back a little bit. I don't think anyone's expecting that they'll just completely take this off the negotiation table, but trying to push back some of those phase out dates a little bit further so folks can try to plan ahead accordingly. So where does all this stand right now? The Senate is likely to make several changes to the House passed bill. Negotiations are ongoing as we speak. Everyone kind of has their own different priorities, whether it's SALT, whether it's these clean energy credits, whether it's Medicaid. House hardliners wanted a full repeal of these credits, but it looks like, depending on the outcome within the Senate, that they'll probably remain in one way or another. So I'll stop there. A lot going on in DC and a lot unknown on how the Senate's going to approach this exactly.
Can we add this to our matrix that we receive? Is it on there? Purple matrix?
It's not really a bill.
I know, but can we
Yeah.
add like the update at the same clip that we get that?
Yeah,
Or something.
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. We get, yeah.
I will add that. Thank you. Any questions for Joseph? I want to make sure.
I mean, just guessing that there's no point in us advocating, not advocating, whatever. I mean, there's no, right, this is just update of what the implications could be, but we don't actually have.
Yeah,
any.
and I'll bring it back to the California guidance is that you're still governed by CARB and by our advanced clean fleet regulations local or in California, no matter what the federal government does. So all of the local procurement targets that local agencies have to meet about zero emission vehicle transition for fleets are still in place. And they're not going to go anywhere. So this is more of more private side, this could very much affect the supply of electric vehicles. Manufacturers will probably stop creating them to the clip that they are right now if something like this kind of goes through the federal level. So ancillary impacts, but you're still under the gun from CARB to be doing these transitions at a time. I think it's already 50% by now, I think, is electric transition for fleets. So
It'll be hard to meet those targets if there's no supply.
and that's the challenge, yeah. But we heard immediately, as soon as this was announced in the Senate and federal level, I think a lot of people from California were interpreting it as, oh, great, I don't have to follow the procurement targets anymore. It's like, no, that's completely separate. CARB still has the authority to enforce all of that.
There is a new question, though, about the Commission on State Mandates, that now that the applicability of HCF regs are only on the public fleets, that we could technically appeal for reimbursable costs to the state. So that is something that we're diligently working on. That is a very long process. But that's something that could potentially happen to alleviate some of those costs.
Yeah.
And you have to go soon, so do you want to, how do you want to proceed?
We can just finish and then I think, I'm trying to send the vice chair, she can take over. I've been giving feedback as we're going, so appreciate it.
That's
Oh, are
it.
you done?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's me, that's me, I'm sorry. So, one of the things that we wanted to sort of wrap all this up is that we engage in this in a lot of ways. So at a statewide level, we're part of Cal Cities, which does sort of statewide lobbying. We have Townsend that helps us with our legislative platform. As part of Cal Choice, SBCE has its own lobbyist for specific load serving entity items. We are a member of the Local Government Sustainable Energy Coalition, or LGSEC, which really advocates at the regulatory side of things mostly, so PUC, CEC. We're part of Green Cities California, which does not advocate, but is a best practice sharing group. So we tend to coalition build there and then together go off and send letters. We work with the Building Decarbonization Coalition, especially on AB 306. We have a regional coalition. We're part of the Santa Barbara County Climate Collaborative, which does some of this coalition building. And we're currently working, because if that wasn't enough, we're currently working on a climate specific coalition statewide that would really do more of this work that we've talked about today. Because it turns out a lot of local governments don't feel equipped, staffers don't feel equipped to really engage in this process. And so, you know, it's helpful, obviously, having Townsend and our other lobbyists help us, but we really need a coalesced voice at the state. So more to come on that. That's really at the ground floor right now. But yeah, so we're working to build our brand. We're working to build our power and influence. And there's a lot of road to go on that. But the more we do it and are strategic about it, I think the more impact we can have.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, there are a number of bills that will impact city-specific issues that we will want very tailored advocacy. Yeah, and, you know, comprehensive letters that point to, you know, by passing this bill into law, this will happen to this section of the city. There are other bills that may be larger in scope. We talk about the Pathways Initiative. Advocacy within a channel like that may be best appropriate for a CalCTA or leaning on one of our, you know, associations. So just kind of determining like which button to press for what, you know, bill and its impacts on the city is really part of our strategy in terms of elevating our voice when we need it, and then also joining coalitions when it's more effective.
Okay, well, should we turn it over to comments? And
Oh,
yeah,
okay, go
I'm gonna
ahead.
go and then I have no comments. I appreciate it very much. I made them all already.
I was gonna say, I really appreciate that even though we are also the Ledge Committee, that this deeper dive specifically about sustainability and resilience and to our brand and those types of things that we can advocate for with a different lens, I think is really helpful, even though it seems like we're the same people in Solid Ledge Committee, but it isn't, because this is very tailored to that, and I really appreciate that extra step here. And I think, I mean, unless you need clarification from us of what our position.
We're gonna do a motion for,
Oh, do you want a motion for all of them or different ones? Do you want to take them one at a time?
I only had one that we were specifically taking.
Oh, I didn't know we were
It-
taking motions.
And that was
'cause I would make
79.
motions.
It was 7 because it wasn't on the it wasn't on the agenda, that's why. But if we could just fold that in there without having to take a motion, I prefer, since Megan wasn't here,
Great.
so
Yeah.
I think if you, our feedback was pretty
I think it's clear.
clear, so yeah, I don't think we need to do motions.
And then we were clear on 609, what our plan is there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And then. And we're all a no on SB 79.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, that was clear. Are there any others that you need clarity on? Like, are you,
We're
okay,
supporting a 256,
Yep.
and then we're supporting the two AI bills.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
supporting
We'll get those
56.
letters in to you, Barbara.
Yep. And then we talked about 540 with amendments? Or did we kind of say,
We're sort of standing
Stand
back.
back, okay.
Yeah.
Concept, but
Okay,
getting
yeah,
back
that's
and
right.
advocating
Yeah.
coalition.
and did we have support 4996 with a brag letter?
Yes, with the city embodying best practices.
Right, best practices brag letter,
Perfect.
okay,
With Brad Letter.
Yeah, that's what I wrote down.
right, okay.
That's a great flag.
Are there any other? Was there any other public comment? So with that,
I just wanted to say, really appreciate the work you do for us. It's like night and day. One, I feel much more informed and we're able to have better discussions than before, with not having a lobbyist before up there. So just really appreciate the in-depth, and I agree that targeting sustainability bills here is different than Ledge Committee. And I also like that we're getting out ahead on some of them, because Santa Barbara, we do have a voice in environmental sustainability globally. And so it's important that we are proactive and we continue that rather than rest on our our past laurels, so.
Would you say we want to be leaders as? part of our
Exactly,
vision?
exactly. So anyways, I just want to say appreciate, and it's good to see you in person. so.
Item 5 for.
Oh, just really quickly before this item,
Apologize.
is this something you would like to have annually?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's good, fast changing.
And with the option for, as the chair suggested, emergency is something, if that one particular bill is moving fast, then we need to move quickly. So not limited to annual, but at least.
Yeah. We will be sure to provide Barbara and you all with.
And it aligns with our platform, so
Yeah.
if you move, we'll just keep you informed. of
Yeah.
the Progress,
Thank you.
or I should probably not use that word advancement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For item 5 for future, are we on it?
Yeah.
Oh, just the topics, it's actually one of the items today, but it's. At some point, when we understand more what is actually gonna happen in DC regarding the electric vehicles. And you kind of touched on it, I'm concerned that. If we still, the municipalities still have to follow the advanced clean fleet and there is no market for the vehicles. But we're still required to do that, especially for trucks where they still have to dent the market. I'd like to get an update, what is being done, because. We have to be able to do business, and if the infrastructure is there is not to do it, or it's so expensive. But we have no choice but to pay for it, I think that we really need to understand what our options are. But we can't, we won't know until what happens in DC happens in
Right.